Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Sober Yoga Girl. I am your host, Alex McRobbs. And before we get into this episode, I just wanted to share a quick thing, which is that I've started a free new Sober Curious Facebook support group. So if anyone is looking for community resources, check it out. You can find it at Sober Curious Yoga free support group, or DM me on Instagram, email me if you would love to join. And today I am super excited because we have a guest here with us. And I actually had the privilege of speaking at her sober community a few weeks ago when I was in quarantine, which was amazing. So Kelly is with me, and she is the creator of the East Coast Sober Squad, which is a North American based community. It's a women's only community, right? Is it for women?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's so cool. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, first, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So yeah, once I got a little over a year into sobriety, I kind of started to feel a little complacent in my journey, I guess. And kind of, I felt really comfortable with being sober and living a sober life, but I knew that that's not where I wanted to leave it. I kind of felt like, I needed to do something else to keep my mind focused on sobriety, because I just think that complacency within that realm is probably a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So, I started to explore ways that I could give back or something that I could do. And just like pretty much everything in my sober life, I feel like if I think about something and I want it badly enough, I just go do it. Even though I might not know exactly how to do it, I'll just jump kind of head first. And I just one day I was on Instagram, and I basically was like, okay, I had a few women who were interested. They were on the East Coast at that point in time. And so that's kind of where the name came from. And the idea originally was to have a group of people we were in the middle of the pandemic, the first year. And I wanted to just create something because, at that time we were thinking, okay, the pandemic will be beyond this at a certain point, and people will want to get together, in person to meet other sober people. So let's form something here for people on the East Coast. So we'd be kind of geographically close to one another, and maybe we could all meet up or something. So I kind of just started it like, posting a slide on my story. Like, if you have interest on in being in this women's group for sober women, just let me know. And it started small. And, as I said, I was just kind of taking it like one thing at a time, not really knowing where it was going. And so I planned my first meeting, which was, it was really small, but it was really nice just to talk with people who understood. We had a big group chat on Instagram, which is kind of how we kept in contact throughout the day. And anyway, as time went on, people are reaching out asking, do you have to be on the East Coast to join? And, the more I got that question, I would get them sporadically. And then the more people who would ask, I was like, okay, I'll let you in, even though you're not on the East Coast. It's no big deal. I'm not going to say no to someone. And finally, it just got to the point where I was like, we just need to open this up to everyone. We're just going to leave the name the same for now, unless something else like hits me that I love. And up to now, nothing has. So we grew and we continued to grow. And to the point where we outgrew an Instagram group chat. I think you can have like 30 some people in a group chat on Instagram. And so, we moved a couple of times, and we eventually landed on Slack, which is where we are currently. So, people can reach out anytime, 24/7. People are all over the place. So people are in different time zones. So generally, you're going to have somebody respond to you. We have now, instead of just me doing like one meeting every week or every other week as a single mom, it's kind of hard for me to do tons of meetings on my own. So, now with the Slack group being, I think we're about 300 members now, and not all of them are active, of course, but, we've got a very solid core group. So now we've got volunteers who take time out of their schedules to do meetings on different nights. So most nights of the week or days of the week, we have at least one meeting. We've got a channel within Slack where if somebody wants to call their own meeting, like they need to talk to someone, they just go in and they schedule it with whoever might be available. We do a book club. We do speakers, as you know, because we had you as a guest, but just what we've done up until now, and probably for the foreseeable future, I've just tried to bring in women, mostly from the Instagram community, just because that's where kind of everyone found East Coast Sober Squad. So I know everyone has access there. So for our speakers, I'm looking for sober women who are making a difference, who are making an impact. And usually I'll just ask for feedback from the group. Like, who do you guys want to talk to? Who do you guys want to hear from? And I mean, I'll ask anybody. I don't care. I mean, I'll send Glennon Doyle a message, whatever. I'm like, I'll send anybody
amazing.
a message. And, so a lot of people have been just like you, very generous with their time and coming in and talking to us. And yeah, it's just been amazing. We've got our Instagram channel now and members who host different days. So I'm not having to do all of that. Just people really stepping up and, all in the name of like one common thread, which is sobriety. But we've all found a lot of common bonds within that group. So it's been really a beautiful thing to watch.
That's incredible. And you know what I liked about it? When I came on to be a guest, it reminded me of the mindful life practice in the sense that sometimes you get on these sober community. Like I tried another sober community and there were like 200 people on the Zoom call. And I, left after like a couple of minutes because I was like, this is just not for me. And like, that is actually what I liked about your communities. Even though it's so big, it still felt like really intimate and really small and really comfortable. Like it just felt like a casual, welcoming space and everyone felt safe to, unmute themselves and ask me questions. And it wasn't like this big kind of like intimidating like crowd. And I think that is something really important that a lot of these communities kind of miss the mark on is like, well, it's not miss the mark, it's something for everyone. Some people prefer the anonymity of that giant sea, but for me, it's always been about like connection and community. And I love that you seem to be providing that even though you're getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's been really nice. And I think you're right. The comfort level for people in a smaller group, especially if they're on the Slack group and they're active within like the chat forums, you get to know people, even though you're not necessarily like hearing their voice. We talk, we have conversations on Slack throughout the day, every day. And you kind of start to feel like, these are my friends. These are people who I'm just meeting up with to talk to. And when the meetings are like 15, 20 people, you can easily do that. And you recognize everyone's face. And then for people who are comfortable, we don't tell you have to put your camera on or that you have to say something. You can come listen. So I think that's a big hurdle for people to get over is like the first meeting and getting on the Zoom and actually just being there. I think for some people is like, it's intimidating. But yeah, I feel like the size of the groups are definitely making an impact and people feel heard. And they feel like they can talk about whatever. So
tell me a bit about you. First of all, how long have you been sober for?
Well, I got sober July 28th, 2019.
Okay.
So it's been about 2.5 years.
Amazing.
Yeah, so right. You're close. I think we have close dates.
We do. I'm April 13th.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's in the grand scheme of things, I'm like, okay, I'm 45 years old. Like 2.5 years doesn't sound like a lot, but when I think about how much time I spent drinking, like 2.5 years of not drinking is a long time for someone who had the tendencies that I had and the problems that I had. So yeah, it feels great. It feels great. Best decision I've ever made for sure.
And so tell me a bit about your life before quitting drinking.
It started out, I think, pretty normal as far as being introduced to alcohol. And, in high school, my parents didn't drink, still don't drink. So I wasn't around it at home. But, eventually in high school, you get introduced to it. And for me, it was kind of like, I can't tell you that I remember exactly the first time that I drank. But I do know that when I did drink, even then, like I always wanted more. It's like, I didn't want the party to stop. I just wanted to keep going. I was always the one who would, be doing something crazy. The one whose people's parents were like, oh, we don't want that girl over here, that kind of thing. Because I just had that I don't know that I didn't have a stop button or an off button. And so, it started there. And then of course in college where, you feel like everybody drinks. And so nothing seemed abnormal to me, but looking back on it now, I mean, I was blacking out. Even then I was doing a lot of things that were completely against like my moral compass, the way that I was raised, the values that I held. I was doing a lot of things that I definitely wouldn't have done sober. Just engaging in a lot of really stupid activities and, just regrettable things that you wake up and be like, oh my gosh, just embarrassed or ashamed. But I didn't think of it like that. It would kind of go through my brain and then onto the next party or onto the next bar or whatever. And I think just the college environment sort of lends itself to people who have a problem kind of disappearing anyway. It doesn't really make a blip on the radar. So, I did well in college. I think that was another thing that probably, a lot of people didn't maybe think it was a problem because I got really good grades. I got a great job out of college with a successful company. I still work there. And from the outside, I think a lot of things just looked like normal, other than my drinking habits, which some people would witness and some people wouldn't. And I think just, happy hours from work, you'd go to happy hour with people from work and most people would leave after a couple. And I'd be the one who was there until close with like all the shady people who are hanging out at the bar until close. And then maybe I was going somewhere else and getting into things that nothing good happens after the bar closes. It's just probably even before that. So it was just a lot of warning signs that I can see now that I didn't see then. And of course, if you're hanging around people who have the same behaviors as you, no one's calling you out on it because it's normal. I had issues with arrests. I had issues with DUI, but people talked me down from that, like things that would normally, cause people to take a closer look and reevaluate. And it's not to say I wasn't like ashamed or embarrassed or having questions after those things happened, because I certainly did, but it just never lasted that long. I would go right back to what I was doing. And it kind of just snowballed. I got in, had drug use involved with alcohol for part of my story. Luckily for me, that was something that I was more easily able to stop than drinking. But yeah, I had my daughter who is 8, like I mentioned to you. And so when I got pregnant with her, of course, I'm like, okay, obviously you don't drink when you're pregnant. You take care of yourself, super healthy, doing all the things, eating well, working out, feeling great. And I think, again, just that misconception that I feel like I've heard a lot of people say is you're pregnant and you stop just like that. And so it confirms in your brain that there really isn't a problem. Like, because if there was really a problem, wouldn't I have more issues with not drinking? Or I don't know. I think you just tell yourself whatever makes you feel good at the time, to kind of make yourself feel better. But yeah, after I had her, her dad and I, we weren't married, and we ended up parting ways when she was about 1. And with that came kind of like I had half of my time to myself because she would be with her dad for part of the time. And so it all just almost probably worse than what it was before, just kind of reappeared and took over again. And, going to the bar by myself and just hanging out with random people and whatever. So it was a big, ugly blob of chaos for the most part for about 20 years. Wow. Until, the big boom hit when I quit.
And what was the moment that made you quit?
Unfortunately, it was another brush with law enforcement. And I had been day drinking with a friend, and definitely had way, way too much to drink and got behind the wheel of my car and got pulled over for speeding. And, when that happened, as soon as it happened, I'm like, in my head, I know where this is going because I've been here before, but I know it's going to be, the ramifications are going to be worse. And now I have a child. Like, this isn't what I want to be. Like, even in my state of mind, like I've told this story many times, but even just like sitting in the holding cell, like thinking about this, because I had a lot of time on my hands at that point. I'm thinking like, this is it. You can't do this. You have a responsibility. I had a responsibility to myself. But I think in those early days, it was more, my thinking was more of, I have a responsibility for my child who I love more than anything. And, I preach constantly to her about strong women and, taking care of yourself and being healthy and being good to yourself. Yet I'm over here doing all of these things that completely contradict that. And I can't do both. She's smart. She's going to see through this. And so that's when I stopped. Like, unfortunately, it took a lot of, bad consequences, way too many. But I think what I tell myself is, even at the point I was at, there are people who hit that point and still don't stop. And, it's hard. And, but yeah, I just made the decision that it had to quit. It had to be done. And that's what I did. I quit. And, it's been, the first year was kind of interesting, but yeah, it's really my life and just my outlook and the way that I approach everything, parenthood, my family, friendships, work, whatever. It's just been a complete turnaround.
It's amazing. And in so many people, that's what it is. It's like, as soon as you quit, it's like everything gets better, and it's like, you don't realize when you're drinking that this is like the one thing that if you just stop doing, whole life would be better.
Yeah, infinitely. I mean, I had some kind of surprises along the way in that, I thought that all of my problems were just going to disappear when I got sober. And of course, as we know, that isn't the case.
Right.
But life in and of itself and the way that I think it's just a huge perspective shift and an outlook shift. And just, I had to train myself how to approach life in a different way and to be okay with not, being happy all the time or with not, feeling worthy all the time. There were a lot of bad feelings, but I had to learn basically for the first time in adulthood, how to do all of those things. And it's hard. And you lose some people along the way, but you gain a lot of people too. And it was a lot of finding myself and kind of relearning how to be an adult. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I was always an adult who was like a binge drinker, like a partier. That was my personality. That was my persona. And I didn't know anything else. So to go from that to completely cutting the one thing that basically bonded me to the people I considered friends. It was hard, but I don't have any regrets.
And so tell me about, in that year sober, what tools and resources did you draw upon? Like, were you part of any group? Did you use community? Like, what did you do?
So pretty much immediately after, that final rock bottom happened, I knew I had counseling before for substance abuse. But when I did it the first time, it was kind of like in my brain, like I wasn't ready to do it. I was just kind of doing it because I thought people wanted me to do it.
Right.
But oddly enough, despite that, I did connect really well with the counselor. He was really, really great. I liked him. So I immediately, like literally the day after all of this stuff happened to me, I sent him an email and I was like, okay, I'm coming back. I need to come back to therapy and I'm ready to really do this. And so that was, first and foremost for me. He recommended that I try AA, which was scary for me. And I remember him doing that the first go around too. And I was kind of like, okay, I'll go. But, I never really did it. And I still was really tentative about it. But he was more like, if for no other reason, you need to be around people who do understand what you're going through. And I think it'll make you feel like you're not the only person who's been through some bad things. And so I did. I went probably went for, gosh, I don't know, 6 months maybe. And it was until the pandemic hit. It was until the pandemic really like took hold. And there were a lot of parts of it that did help me. I learned a lot. I heard a lot of stories that I was kind of like, wow, okay. One, I heard a lot of stories of people saying a lot of the same things that I was feeling, which was helpful because I didn't know anybody in person at all who had been to any kind of counseling or treatment or, admitted they had any kind of problem with substances. So just to hear other people saying that made me feel better. And, I just learned a lot about being okay with talking about what you're going through and not having to like feel shame about something that you did while under the influence of something that changes the chemistry of your brain, So I think it helped me in that way. But ultimately, it really didn't. It was not going to be a long-lasting relationship. It's just, I read Quit Like a Woman, which is like a Bible as far as I'm concerned. And that book really, really changed a lot of my perspective. And after having read that, listening to a lot of podcasts, recovery podcasts and reading other Quit Lit, I just kind of started developing my own sort of pathway. And, so from that point forward, I really I did a lot of it on my own initially. I was married at the time and I did have support, from my spouse, and my parents were supportive, but they didn't know what it was like to be addicted to anything. Right. They don't have experience with that. So I think it's different to have support outside of recovery versus inside. But I like working out and podcasts were basically my recovery for a while, that, and, coupled with the therapy that I was doing, just the one-on-one. But, like I was saying, fast forward to when I decided I wanted to kind of create the group that I created, I sort of did that in mind, having in mind what I would have liked to have had when I was in my first year, if I was looking for something at that time, what would it have been? What would it look like? So I kind of ran with that as my premise, I guess, for the group. And I wanted something that everybody felt welcome to come to. If you do 12 steps, fine. If you don't, fine. If you don't have a specific thing you're doing, I don't care. If you just want to be here and read the comments, fine. Like, I just wanted to have a place there where people felt like they were not by themselves. And I mean, just that aspect fully to me is one of the most important things. Like, I did this by myself for a while, and I think I could have done it longer, probably, if I'd had to, but why? Yeah. I've just found that it's so much better when you're talking to other people who know. And it wasn't until like probably, just before I created East Coast Sober Squad is when I found Instagram and the community. And I was like, whoa, I wish I had known about this in my first year, because I kind of did not do social media really for my first year that much. And I had no idea that the community there was so supportive and so vast and just so many good people. So yeah, once I found Instagram, I was like on fire.
So incredible. And hearing your story of how you shifted from like doing it alone to then creating this whole community and bringing all these people in. And like, I think I've heard it before where they say like, we become the help that we needed most. And that sounds like what you really did. Like you created something that you would have loved to be part of in your early days of sobriety.
Yeah.
So inspiring.
Sure. Anyone who's listening to this in East Coast Sober Squad will be like, oh my gosh, Kelly, you say this all the time, but I'm just not like a super emotional, feely kind of person. Right. I'm working on it. I'm getting better. But, I think I was kind of in this bubble of recovery by myself because it just felt more comfortable to me.
Right.
And I think a lot of people feel that way, even if they are very, very sensitive people or people who have lots of big feelings. I think it can almost be as isolating as drinking is to some people. For those people who, drink by them, don't go, like for me, I was a go out drinker. I wanted to be around tons of people, but a lot of people isolate. And I think sobriety can do the same thing to you.
Right.
And so I just feel like there needs to be more acceptance of just all kinds of communities, whatever it is that brings people together and helps them to stay the path and to recognize that, just keep going. And you have people here who want to support you. So help me help you. It's like,
absolutely.
So yeah.
It's so amazing. Honestly, like just hearing other people's stories of how they have gone from like this dark place to creating such an amazing, like thriving community. Like it's very inspiring. So it's incredible. You should be so proud of everything you accomplished.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm still like shocked every day, I think, because I always joke, like people who knew me, like if people I hung out with at the bar, like knew I was doing this right now, which I'm sure they do not because they just don't. But people would be like, there's no way this is the same person, because it's just a huge testament to the changes that can come about when your priorities shift and when you start focusing on yourself first, and then recognizing that by doing that, you're also going to be allowed to focus on other people and help them too.
Right.
Like me telling my story, I feel like can help someone else. And, it's like a pay it forward kind of thing. So if me talking inspires someone else to do that, then, something I say might not resonate with you, but it might resonate with someone else. But then you've heard me tell my story and then you tell yours and, your story touches someone else. And it's just, it's like the most simple thing ever, but we feel like we need to make it so complicated.
Yeah, that's so true. So I have one more question for you. If you had any wisdom for someone who is starting out a sober, curious, alcohol-free journey, what would you suggest? What would you recommend?
I think probably I would say, you're always going to find a reason to not start your journey. There's always going to be an event. There's always going to be an excuse. There's always going to be something that's holding you back. And I used to do that a lot. I would say, I'm not going to drink anymore. And then something would come up and I'd be like, okay, well, I want to get through this. And then maybe, and I think a lot of people do that, or they're worried or they're afraid about how they're going to be received. And there's just so much fear attached to any kind of change, right? I mean, that's just normal human behavior. But if I tell you that change is going to be hard, but it's going to bring about so many more possibilities than alcohol has ever, what has alcohol ever given you? Like I could name 10 things now off the top of my head that are mind-blowingly amazing that sobriety has given me. And I can't name one good thing that has ever come from me, like going out to a bar and drinking or sitting at home and drinking. It just never led to anything good. And even if you didn't have rock bottom moments or bad moments, the harm you're doing to your mental health, to your physical health, your well-being, even if it just makes you feel like garbage. I mean, do you want to keep doing that? Like, so I would say throw those reasons out. Like you've got to start. The only way to get there is to start today. And if you start today, you're going to get there faster than if you start tomorrow, So that's my biggest piece of advice. And just to like everything I've been saying is just connect with people, even if it's just like if you don't want to out yourself for being sober, make like a fake profile on Instagram and just follow sober accounts and get that motivation and get that inspiration and reach out to people. And you'd be amazed at how many people actually like write back to you and do care and want to see you succeed. So you don't have to do it by yourself, I think is another big one for me.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. I love that. If you start today, you're going to get there faster than you start tomorrow. It's beautiful. Love that. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for coming on the show. It was so amazing and inspiring to hear your story. And I am going to toss in the episode description all of the links to the East Coast Sober Squad website and Instagram and Kelly's Instagram. So if anyone wants to connect with Kelly, you can click those links there. And it was honestly amazing. I really, really appreciate your time. So thank you. And I'm sure I will see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay. Bye.